Good evening, folks, family, friends, loved ones, enemies, frenemies, wizards, witches, muggles, mudbloods, people of Middle Earth to another episode of Disguised Coverage, the only podcast in existence. I promise you, I swear to you, I would sign an oath confirming my declaration of this, the only podcast in existence that gives you an equal amount of blueberries in each muffin. I am your host, Anthony Prohaska. Find me on the old Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro 2_ANT. Give me a follow on the old Twitter. Give me a follow on TikTok as well. Same exact handle, pro 2_ant, pro 2_ANT. In tonight's episode, I'm not alone. Hopefully, you would have gathered that by either seeing the episode description on whatever you're watching or listening, or if you're joining us here live tonight or watching this video after it's been live, I don't know how you want to verbalize that, you would see that Mr. Kendall Mirsky is on your screen because I am joined by Mr. Kendall Mirsky because, Kendall, we got a really fun topic tonight. We are going to dive into the Buffalo Bills offense and go position group by position group, rank them, rate them, talk about them in terms of strength, depth, functionality, the top of the position group, the bottom, so on and so forth, group by group. We're going to do the same thing next week for the defensive side of the ball, which we'll be joining this show again in order to go down that road and down that topic. But we got a fun one tonight. Offense is fun. Offense is sexy. Josh Allen's fun. Stephon Diggs is fun. And what I also think is good about this episode is it starts to put things into perspective a little bit as we get closer to the start of training camp and preseason and then the regular season. When you start to look at it from this perspective and you start to break things down on a granular level, you start to kind of put into perspective what this team holistically looks like by analyzing it from a detailed position group perspective.
Yeah, I'm really excited for this. I think I'll pat you on the back here. I think it's a really great topic because it not only makes you analyze the team, and obviously what we have in-house with the Buffalo Bills, but it makes you analyze them relative to their peers and relative to these other position groups around the league. And I think it's really fun to set the table in that way and kind of holistically talk about the NFL while zooming in and putting a microscope perhaps on the Buffalo Bills. But I think this is a good exercise to shed some perspective on these position groups relative to the rest of the landscape. Because sure, I think we all have a ton of confidence this year, but like you said, granularly.
It's such a hard word to say.
It's not
such
easy.
a hard word to, like, dude.
Going position by position, you don't really think about how the Bills stack up against other teams at those positions. You think about, the Buffalo Bills, odds on favorite to win the Super Bowl this year, all that kind of stuff. But how does each position group stack up? And that's what we're going to do tonight and next week as well. I think it's a really fun topic. It'll definitely shed some light on the entire NFL and obviously the Buffalo Bills.
Very, very good point. I got to stop and bring this comment up from Jason. Jason, you're fantastic. I love you and your consistent support for the tree. And the tree would most definitely make the roster. This is a tier 1 all-pro caliber, whether first or second team. I'll settle for second team. That's a starting level tree right there. That's all pro. And then you add in like the little nuance, like the little lantern that matches it. Like we just got all pro activity and ambiance going on here. I appreciate you recognizing that, Jason. And yeah, Kendall, I really like what you said about this exercise that we're going to go into tonight, because it's on the surface of it, we're ranking. So we're going to talk about quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, offensive line. We're going to rank them in terms of which is the strongest on this team and which is the weakest. And in doing so, you look at it from like a team perspective, but then also when you're like grading these groups individually. So, and we're going to dive into it a little bit once, we really get rolling here, but we're grading them on a scale of 1 to 5. And when you're doing each of those groups and grading them on a scale of 1 to 5, exactly like you said, you're putting into perspective of like, okay, naturally, you don't even have to like think about it consciously. You're just automatically thinking like, okay, like I'm grading the running backs. What kind of grade would I give them? And you immediately think like, okay, well, what running back room in the league is like a 1 and is terrible? What kind of room is like a 5 and is like the best? Okay, and how do the Bills compare within that? Because I think that's something that I don't think you see a lot of that group by group across like any comparison. At this time of year, exactly like you said, it's all like, which is fine, but it's all holistic team perspective. It's like this team is the Super Bowl odds of this team is viewed as this, but nobody, I think, really looks at, okay, how does Team A's wide receiver group stack up against Team B's wide receiver group in the rest of the division, or their secondary or linebackers or whatever have you? And maybe wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Maybe that's something that you and I might get into as this offseason progresses on a league level and a Bills level tied in. But yeah, so I thought this was a very fun thing. I appreciate you giving me a pat on the back there for this idea and concept, because it's, as you know, we've talked about it going back in the film room and we've talked about it offline. This is the dead time for content creation and stuff to talk about, especially right now where there's no practices. There's no, even with, you mentioned it to me last week, and watching my episode from last week, you're squeezing blood from a stone at this point. And I fully believe in everything I said, but I'm watching, I'm watching pressers, with my eyes glued to the screen, okay, who's going to say something that and I'm writing down everything. I'm transcribing everything. And then I'm trying to connect it to things that other players or coaches are saying, because I'm trying to find these themes and these concepts and all of these things to kind of tie in and make a holistic piece out of it. Because I don't want to just bring something up just to bring it up in order to I just got to put an episode out. So let's put an episode out. But it's tough. You're squeezing blood from a stone. You're Sean McDermott trying to turn Levi Wallace into a starting corner. And there's not a lot of speed or strength or length or size. And you got to figure it out. And so this is a fun one to kind of mix into the doldrums of the offseason. And we'll jump right into it. And so for those of you joining us live, as I like to always mention on the show, one, thank you very much for being here if you're here live. Two, we love the engagement and we love the interaction on this show. So as we go group by group, we want to know your rankings. We want to know your thoughts, your concerns, your worries. Jason's already getting in on the action, saying he's curious about what the wide receiver room rating will be. He said, I'll be patient, wait and see. Appreciate you, Jason. We want to know your guys' ratings, girls and guys' ratings and rankings as we go through to put things in perspective. And again, to break it down, we're going to go group by group. Quarterback, wide receiver, running back, tight end, offensive line. Each of those position groups. We're going to talk about them top to bottom, strengths, weaknesses, functionality, depth, all of that. We are going to assign them a number rating on a scale of 1 to 5. And then we're also going to rank that position group out of those 5 groups on the offense. So if we think QB is a 5, then QB is number 1. And if you think whatever group is 2.2, that falls in as 4 or 5 or whatever have you. And that's what we're going to do on this episode as we go group by group. But before we do that, I'd like to bring up the sponsor. I like to vary it in different episodes where we bring it up. You guys should know the deal by now. This show is sponsored by One Pie Pizza, the best pizza in Buffalo, hands down. Delicious sweet sauce pie, terrific cheese to sauce ratio, a cup of char pepperoni. They make their own homemade blue cheese. They're doing a drive to fight Alzheimer's right now, which is tremendous. I mention this all the time. They are consistently doing drives and initiatives, whether it's October and, working with Roswell to try and knock out cancer, whether it's, partnering with the SPCA or Toys for Tots. They're always doing something to try and better the community and better the city and kind of the world by extension. So go out, get yourself some One Pie Pizza. The online menu can be found in the episode show notes here on YouTube or any one of the podcasting apps or platforms you are listening to this episode on. Go and treat yourself to some One Pie Pizza. Go get some of the best pizza in Buffalo and also do some good for the community and the world. Trying to fight something in Alzheimer's that impacts a lot of people every year and is something truly devastating and debilitating for individuals and their loved ones and family and friends by extension. So go out and do some good with all that kind of stuff. If you are here with us live right now, drop a like on this video, please and thank you. If you feel that we're worthy of it, which I hope you do. And if you don't think we're worthy of it, then I think you need to take a long, hard look at yourself and figure out where you've gone wrong as a person. But I digress. We're going to jump into our first group here. Quarterbacks. Oh, Joel, do they ship pizza? Maybe. I doubt it, but maybe. Maybe you call and you say, hey, I want some, and maybe they flash freeze it and they send it to you wherever you are. I don't know. Maybe we could figure it out. That'd be fantastic. You're probably going to have to pay an arm and a leg or a pretty penny, but I'll tell you what, it's worth every penny because it's fantastic. We're going to start with quarterbacks as I pull up. I've been typing my notes up now and splitting it screen by screen. Oh, yeah. I normally write them by hand, and I didn't have anything in front of me, and I just almost panicked. I was like, where are my notes?
Right.
Yeah, I looked down, and I was like, oh. But we're going to start with the quarterbacks.
Wait, so does that mean your pen is just for show now?
Yeah, I just like Twitch with it. But also I have stuff next to me. Like I'll write down timestamp stuff for the episode
Okay, there
or
you
notes
go.
for myself
It's
offhand.
not for show. It's not
No,
for show.
no. So I'm definitely, that's why you'll see it. Sometimes like I'll pull it here and the cap is off, and sometimes I pull it back and the cap is on. I'm like using it and doing things
Okay.
as we go through.
Fair enough.
Or I'm lying and it's all just for show. It's like somebody having like a cigarette and like never smoking it, but it's always just behind their ear because they think
Oh yeah, I just want to look cool.
Yeah. Bro, do you smoke? Pff, no. I just think it's sweet to have a cigarette because it's cool. We're going to start with the quarterback room. Josh Allen, Case Keenum, Matt Barkley now. Kendall, I'm going to start with you because you are the guest. What rating on a scale of 1 to 5 did you give the Buffalo Bills quarterback position group, and where do they rank in terms of, 1 through 5 on this offensive side of the ball?
So in terms of where they rank amongst the Buffalo Bills on the offensive side of the ball, I have them as the number 1 group. The quarterback group is my top group.
Also for those listening or watching, we don't know each other's answers. I don't know where Kendall has his rankings. I don't know what his ratings are, anything. He doesn't know mine, so on and so forth. Continue.
Mm-hmm. So I gave them a 4.3. I felt like going any higher than that was a little too much. And Mr. Diggs comes in and says 5. Like,
yeah, he came out swinging.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I really wanted to do that. And the crux of this was based on, yeah, sure, Josh Allen, I feel like that's a 5. I feel solid that Josh Allen is a 5. And I feel really good about getting Case Keenum as our backup. Like, that's a really good backup piece. That was a really good signing for the Bills. Someone who's familiar with Stephon Diggs with their time in Minnesota. I think that's a really good add for them should anything happen to Josh Allen. But there is a clear drop off there, and not only a drop off, there's also a drop off in what you would do as an offense if you're relying on Case Keenum. Like you're switching up the offense and how you're doing things offensively, schematically, if Keenum is the starter versus Josh Allen being the starter. And that's not to ridicule or downplay what Keenum can do as a backup, because I really, really like that addition. But for that reason, I dropped it down to like a 4.3 range. And yeah, I think that 4.5 ballpark, I really think that's a solid area for the Bills to live in. Like I said, this all rounds out with, Josh Allen feeling, if this was just on a starter level, I feel like the group is a 5. It's a 5. But this is the entire group. And I should say, honestly, this probably could have gotten bumped up to a 4.5 if I had like an inkling of seeing into the future, knowing like Matt Barkley would make the practice squad and he's going to be the Davis Webb replacement and he's going to be that guy in Josh Allen's ear, all of that stuff behind the scenes on the bench, in the quarterback room, in the film room, all of that kind of stuff. That does add some value. So that should be talked about. But I think the drop off from Josh Allen to the backup is significant. I feel like this great question, Jason.
I was going to bring that up when you were done speaking. I didn't want you to lose your train of thought.
I got right to it. This is perfect. So I think Keenum is a better backup, but I was more comfortable with handing the reins off to Trubisky should anything, because of the fit and the schematics of it. You don't have to change a whole lot of the offense to fit Trubisky from Josh Allen versus Josh Allen to Case Keenum. You have to tweak some things. And it's the same thing that we saw.
We're not running QB power with Case Keenum.
Exactly. Like you can't do that kind of stuff. And it's the same kind of stuff that we saw when Barkley was the primary backup. You saw the offense change. It legitimately changed when Barkley came in the game as backup for the Bills, 2019 or whenever that was, 2020.
19.
I know, right? Years are weird.
But there's something to be said for that though. Look at the drop off is always significant from quarterback to backup, but look what Tyler Huntley was able to do with Baltimore, because he stepped in for Lamar, and it was, and maybe this is either a knock to Lamar or kudos to Huntley, but the offense, to exactly your point, didn't have to holistically change who they were. They had another mobile quarterback who could run in a similar, I guess, as similar as you can be to a world-class athlete like Lamar Jackson, but you have a guy who's in that mold and in that skill set. You don't really have to tweak too much. Like, you can just kind of be like, okay, well, we had this guy who was a 10 out of 10 in this role. Now we got a guy who's maybe like a 6 or a 6.5, maybe a 7, but it's still the same role, instead of being like, well, we got this other guy now who's an 8, but he can't do any of the stuff that we had before. So what do we do?
Yeah. So that was the main reason that I kind of dampened that
Mhm.
grade. Just that change schematically, what you're going to be asking from him versus Allen is very different. That being said, I don't want to downplay the signing of Keenum, the addition of Keenum. Getting him as the backup is a very
Mhm.
solid piece, very good, stabilizing piece as a backup quarterback. So I really like that. 4.3. I really don't think there are many QB rooms that I would even rank much higher than 4.3 in all honesty. And
Hmm.
I know on a 1 to 5 scale, you would think there is a 5 somewhere out there, but I don't know if I could actually do that. I think I'm a little harsh with my grading in some areas. And I guess quarterback, when you're looking at an entire room, I feel like you get a little harsh because you have to look at the bottom half of the
Oh,
room as
yeah, it's
well.
it's rough. I feel like
It's hard to
we
reach
could
a
get to
5.
the closest thing I could think of that would be a 5 would have been, like, when Mahomes took off and his backup was Alex Smith.
Mm,
I think
okay.
that's close to a 5
Yeah.
because your 1 is Mahomes, and then your 2 is, like, a guy who's been in the playoffs a whole bunch,
There you go.
like,
Exactly.
literally a lot, like oh, yeah,
The
that's
one that
tough.
came to my mind was like the Packers with Rodgers and Jordan Love, but obviously we don't know what's
I don't
going
know who
on with
Jordan
Jordan
Love
Love.
is, though, like, I don't know how good
Exactly.
he is,
We
like,
don't
is
know.
he we're never gonna know that, and I can't believe they took him with a first-round pick, like, oh, it's just man, that's wild, and
But either way, 5 is going to be hard to get to,
yeah.
and I think
For any
me giving
position group, who
for
like
any
anything being a
position.
5 is like,
Mhm.
woof. Like that's a hard
Exactly.
thing to reach. That's a
Exactly. So I wanted to set the stage by saying that with my 4.3. I guess I set the stage on the back end of things
fair.
by saying that, but either way, yeah, I think somewhere in the ballpark of 4.3 is fair.
I am in that ballpark, and I guess I went based on you. I went on the higher end. I went with a 4.5. So
Perfectly
again, to
fair.
start with Mr. Joshua Allen, I I was like looking up like random things. At first, I was going with like advanced metrics and things, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. But I went to just like more of the records piece, and I tweeted out some of them the other day. It's just Josh Allen is the first player in NFL history with 100 passing touchdowns and 30 rushing touchdowns in his first 4 seasons. He's got 135 total touchdowns in his first 4 seasons, which trails only Dan Marino at 144 for the most in NFL history in that span. He's the only player in NFL history with 4,000 passing yards, 30 passing touchdowns, and 8 rushing touchdowns in a season, which he did in 2020. In 2021, granted, in 2021, there was a 17-game season, but 2021, he became the only quarterback in NFL history to throw for 4,000 yards and rush for 750 yards in the same season. He is the first ever, exactly, Ron. He's the first ever quarterback with 9 passing touchdowns and 0 interceptions in any 2-game postseason span. Just metrics that are really, these aren't just like random like records where it's like, oh, he's the only person to, rush for 75 plus yards on a day where it was less than 70 degrees outside and the sun was kind of blurry because it was cloudy and it was between November 1st and November 3rd. There was not just like arbitrary random things. Like he's pulled out some real meaningful stuff. And then you look at his 2021. I didn't want to look at like the raw stats or the holistic perspective. I just wanted to grab some pieces that I thought were really
Mm,
interesting. So of quarterbacks with at least 50 dropbacks last year, and I picked that number, I guess arbitrarily for myself, but I picked it basically, I feel like still an average amount right now of passes per game, even for backups, is like 25 per game. So 50 dropbacks, that is roughly like 2 games, which is
mhm.
a decent enough sample size. So of quarterbacks with at least 50 dropbacks, which there were 40 quarterbacks who had at least 50 dropbacks last year, he was fourth in yards under pressure. He was first in touchdowns when under pressure. Some of the numbers that we talked about in the Josh Allen film room a couple weeks ago, he was third in big time throw percentage at 9.1. Big time throws are the percentage of attempts that are big time throws, and big time throws are any pass with excellent ball location and timing, generally thrown further down the field and or into a tighter window. So even when he's pressured, he's making throws down the field and into tight windows. He is lowest in terms of percentage of pressures turned into sacks at
Yep.
10.6%, which and on a volume metric, again, is skewed a little bit because the Bills were high in terms of passing attempts. But Josh Allen had the most total dropbacks under pressure in the regular season in 2021. And he had the lowest, again, of those 40 quarterbacks with at least 50 dropbacks. He had the most total dropbacks under pressure, but the lowest percent of pressures turned into sacks. That is quarterback play at its finest. That's more than
Mhm.
just being an athlete and being big and strong and agile.
Mhm.
It's because of his mental game and his ability to play quarterback and pocket manipulation and footwork and steps and keeping a proper base to be able to move and bounce and throw anything and everything. Also, a fun fact of everyone in the NFL, every single position, he was 25th in rushing yards for all quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, anybody who got a rush. He was 25th in total rushing yards. Granted, a significant amount of that is scrambles, but still 25th in rushing yards. And he was 11th in runs for first downs. And amongst players with 50 carries, this is wild. Amongst all players with at least 50 carries, he was third in yards per attempt, third in EPA per attempt, and second in terms of points above replacement. You start at the top, cream of the crop. I didn't mean for that to rhyme. I'm a poet and I don't even know it, but I can show it. It just happened. Josh Allen, fantastic. But the real reason this group is a 4.5, I feel you on the Mitch Trubisky piece. I liked having that security blanket aspect to his game last year where, again, he's not Josh Allen, but he lives in at least some semblance of that world. The mobility, the bigger arm, like I get the fit. I'm very happy with Case Keenum. And the Bills went out and traded for Case Keenum. Like they targeted him, they acquired him. And I just love the experience. 9 NFL seasons, 76 appearances, 64 starts. He had 5 seasons with 8 or more starts. For his career, 78 touchdowns, 48 interceptions. He gives you a good mind in the QB room. He's a guy who has seen a lot, and he's still in the league for a reason. Granted, he's been with multiple teams and he's bounced around, but he continues to get contract offers and continues to get job opportunities regularly because of his ability. Granted, not on the field, but I think he offers a lot to the QB room. He's a guy who, you know, you mentioned it, the rapport with Stephon Diggs. He's led a team to an NFC championship. He's been on a playoff run as the guy at the helm. And I think he's going to be very important for the game planning piece week to week. For being in the film room, being on the practice field, helping to identify things and put packages and pieces together and really be able to analyze. And also, Ken Dorsey, we think, is going to be up in the booth this year as a play caller. Ken Dorsey used to be the guy on the sideline with Josh Allen. And Joe Brady is there now, which is nice. But these are all like new people for Allen, Case Keenum as well. It's nice to have another guy who can get in Josh's ear, who has plenty of experience, because you have to stem that tide a little bit from Ken Dorsey going up to the booth. And now you've got new people working with Josh. Granted, Barkley will probably be there on the sideline, but you had another guy who has a voice, who can get in Josh's ear, who can manage emotions and execution in game. And it's nice to have somebody who knows what they're doing and who has that experience being another voice of reason in your ear. Trubisky wasn't that, you know, even though he's got experience under his belt. Keenum has seen a lot. He's done a lot. He understands the mental side of the game. Him being added to this QB room is really what got me up to a 4.5 for this group. And another little point too, I mentioned on Twitter a couple of weeks ago, with all the wide receiver competition that the Bills are going to have this offseason, I'm excited that they have a good thrower of the football at the backup quarterback spot. Like when we're in the preseason and we're trying to figure out, like, what is Isaiah Hodgins going to be? What is Khalil Shakir going to be? What is Marcus Stevenson going to be? You have a real quarterback who's throwing them the ball. No disrespect to Mitchell Trubisky, but you were going to have those ups and downs. If there was a miscommunication on a route, right, and you see like a ball where somebody broke in and the ball went out and you're like, oh, well, whose fault was that? If it happens now, I'm more likely to believe, no, that was Shakir's fault, because Keenum isn't going to make that mistake. He reduces variables. He reduces that variability when you add him in the QB room. And granted, he's not the scheme fit potentially that Trubisky was, and he's very different stylistically from Josh Allen. But I think what he offers from the mental side and potential high floor that he gives you, I think Trubisky gave you a higher ceiling, but a lower floor and more inconsistency in between. Keenum's ceiling is much lower, but that floor is higher, as is that consistent part of his game. And that's why it was a 4.5 for me overall.
Super dependable. This is why I think the blind portion to this is so valuable, because we were both in the same ballpark, but for different reasons. You know, like I was elevated to a 4.3 because of Josh Allen's play, and it was Keenum that kind of brought it down. While I still love Keenum and I really like that signing for literally all of the reasons that you just said. But then for you, it's Keenum was actually the reason that it got elevated to the 4.5. He's the reason that I feel so confident moving forward with what could happen if anything happens to Josh, and the dependability, the consistency. I think that piece about the preseason stuff is so valuable. And I don't even think it goes so much to the Mitch Trubisky side of things, but it's also all the backups before Mitch Trubisky. Like,
Good
it's
point.
been so hard to evaluate the bottom end of the wide receiver room for that reason. It's just, are you going to get the football there? Is everyone going to be on the same page? Do you have a professional in that room that you can depend on and show consistency? It's something that we talked about with the pressers in the last couple of weeks. Frazier talking about dependability and consistency from certain guys, and that's why certain guys get more playing time than others, because you know what you're going to get from them week over week over week. So I think that's a very, very important aspect to this that doesn't get talked about enough. But you actually got my wheels turning on the Josh Allen rushing stuff, so I wanted to look it up.
I knew when I saw you starting
When I
to
was
type
doing
and look for stuff when I was going over, and I was like, he's looking up metrics.
Josh Allen was 8th in broken and missed tackles per attempt amongst all positions.
What'd you look at?
All
SIS?
positions. SIS. Broken and missed tackles per attempt. He is 8th in the entire league. And that's not even restricting like minimum carries. This is including people who had like maybe 1 carry all year and broke that tackle. Like, you know, it's
sample size is there.
Yeah. It's even those guys that have terrible sample size and just mess up the metric, they're all included. And Josh Allen is still 8th. It's incredible how good he is at running the football. And obviously he's still growing as a passer, and he's still great as a passer. So yeah, 4.5, great grade. I kind of feel bad about giving a 4.3, but either way, I mean,
that's
this
still
is
very good.
The number one group on the team, or on the offense, maybe
Yes.
even on the team. Should we do that for next week?
You know what?
That would be really difficult. It would be really difficult.
If we're really trying to long-term, I'm going to use a wrestling term. If we're really trying to long-term book this thing, we could do offense this week, defense next week, and then combine them on the third episode and just do rank the top 5 position groups on this entire team. I think you may have just birthed another episode topic. I like that a lot. I didn't realize Chris was being sarcastic, but I was ready to pull up this comment where Chris was like, if Allen doesn't win us a Super Bowl soon, there needs to be a discussion about wasting McDermott's prime years on him. I've read it reverse, because that's suddenly become like a topic now and thought of like, if the Bills don't win a Super Bowl, then like they've wasted Josh Allen's prime years. And I understand some of it. Yeah. I can never, yes, Sean McDermott needs to be held accountable for the mistakes that he made last year, just like anybody has to be held accountable for their mistakes. But it's just, I don't care how good you think your team is. It's so hard to win a championship, especially in football where the playoffs are not best of anything. It's sudden death, single elimination. It's so hard to win a Super Bowl because the odds are always, I don't care how good your Super Bowl odds are. What is the higher probability? Your one team winning the Super Bowl or one of the other 31 teams winning the Super Bowl? You take the field every single time. How many times does the preseason favorite that everybody thinks is going to win or going to the Super Bowl, how many times does that preseason favorite get to the Super Bowl? How many times is even the team that's crushing it in September, how often are they the team that's hoisting the Lombardi at the end of the year? Who was thinking Cincinnati was going to the Super Bowl last year? They lost to the Jets in New York, where the Bills killed the Jets. They lost to the Bears. They had some horrible games. They went to the Super Bowl. And I mean, granted, T. Higgins pulled off like the craziest face mask penalty I've ever seen, and they didn't call it, but they almost won the Super Bowl last year. And they were a team that in October was full of question marks. Yes. It's so hard to win a championship. And then going with this whole like wasting prime years thing, it's tough, and I get it. But man, it's a dangerous conversation that potentially could spawn an episode again, potentially down the road. We're getting all these content ideas as we go through. Also, what we're getting through is more people joining us live here in the episode, which is fun and awesome. While you're here, if you haven't dropped a like on this video, please go ahead and do so. Likes go a tremendous way towards helping myself and Kendall and the entire team here to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears. Please, please, please. And thank you. Next group that we will move on to, the running backs. Wide receivers.
Do you want to go with wide receivers before running backs? Is there a call?
No, let's go running backs. Let's stay in order. Let's go. I'm thinking of like how we go out from the quarterback out. So I'm like, okay, quarterbacks here, running backs here, wide receiver, tight end, offensive line. So we'll go with the running backs there. I guess it really doesn't matter because we can do whatever the hell we want. Let's go for the running backs here. A position grouping that is getting a decent amount of talk. You have the people who have suddenly become staunch defenders of Devin Singletary and he's RB1 and cannot be touched. And then you've got the people who think James Cook is Alvin Kamara light and then some and is just this absolute dynamic weapon. Then you've got some other people who still maybe believe in Zach Moss a little bit and think that he could take that mantle. Yeah, you're one of them, raising that hand there.
No, I don't think he can take the mantle, but I do believe him.
I will tell you though, I went back and watched some Zach Moss film multiple times, and he wasn't as bad in 2021 as my memory made him out to be. But we'll talk about that when I get the chance to speak. But let's start with you again, Kendall, because you are the guest. And I want to make sure you get out of here in time to get your bottle and go to bed before your parents get upset.
Oh, thank you.
So you're welcome. So let's start. Yeah, you got it, Snips. So let's start with the running back group for the Buffalo Bills. Well, I'm very interested to see what your grade is for them and where you rank them, because I feel like there's a clear top two here in this offense in terms of position group rankings. And then I think the next three can go a variety of ways potentially. So what do you got for the running backs in terms of their rating, their ranking, and then why?
I'll be very honest with you. I was really, really close to making the running backs my second of this group. I was really, really close. They are my third, and I gave them a 3.7. I think this is going to be higher than a lot of people think, but I gave them a 3.7, and for no reason other than the group holistically. I don't have a 3.7 belief in any one of these running backs individually. It's the group. It's how the group comes together. I have a lot of confidence in the complementary style of how they built this running back room, almost like how you build a basketball team. This is my philosophy for a wide receiver room. You want to build your wide receiver room like a basketball team. You want to have your point guard, your guy that can make short, quick movements. You want to have your big man, your dude that can post out people on jump balls, stuff like that. I think they're building this running back room like that, where they have guys that can wear different hats and they all have their specific role. But when they all come together and they live in those roles, it creates a beautiful thing. And that's what I'm expecting this year from the running back group. Obviously, I think we all know what we have in Devin Singletary.
Wade. Oh, sorry.
He's gone. He's like literally gone. He's officially gone. It's wild.
Man,
RB1. We're actually past that. But Devin Singletary is just, we kind of know what we have in him. Not to say he's below average, not to say he's just average, but he's that guy that we know what we're going to get from him. At times it might be average, but I think there's a level of dependability from him where you know you're going to get at least average. And there are those spurts where you can get above average play for a dependable amount of time.
And that's okay when you have a bunch of above average guys in other positions on the rest of the team on the offense.
Exactly. And still on a rookie contract, of course.
Very true.
So that's obviously part of it. I see Taiwan Jones has entered the chat, so that's actually not involved in this.
I like John's comment above that said, "Don't make Kendall break curfew." I like that one too.
Honestly, if I included Taiwan Jones, this grade probably would have been higher.
That's actually fair because his special teams value is real. If we did that, yeah, that's fair.
Probably would have been higher, but I really didn't. I don't think of him as a running back anymore. When's the last time he got a carry?
Maybe that's what's missing with this offense. Maybe
probably before I was born.
Wow. Yeah. That would be, So before you were born. So that was what, like 8 years ago. He probably got a carry.
It keeps on going. All right. So Devin Singletary, level of dependability. We know what we're going to get. It's going to be at least average. We're going to get some dependable above average play from him. He's probably, I don't want to say the bell cow guy, but he's going to be the guy that gets the bulk of the carries for this offense. And then obviously we have the new guy, James Cook, the rookie, someone like you said, Alvin Kamara light. I think there are obviously elements of that to his game, but to compare him to Alvin Kamara is reckless.
Nowhere near the contact balance that Alvin Kamara has, who can be he can get hit by a cement truck and just shake it off and keep going. Like that's elite.
He possesses similar skills to him, but the level of those skills is just different. It's just different. I think the only level where he's even comparable is the receiving level of it. The receiving aspect, sure, you can be comparable on that regard, but if you're lacking on all other areas, then what are we even talking about with this comparison? And that's why I think it's reckless. I think there are parts of it that are fair and true, but it's reckless.
I get that comp, but I'm always wary of that because I feel like it, not even just because I find inaccuracies with it. I just think that those are unfair expectations to lay upon someone like that. Because then you know what, if he comes in and he's not doing what people know Alvin Kamara does, then it's
Mhm.
like, well, he's a bust. How I was told he was going to be Alvin Kamara light,
Alvin
and he's
Kamara.
not like out like that's a tough thing to bear, like
Yeah,
when you're a rookie coming in and you haven't even played it
exactly.
down.
I think the biggest thing with Compson, I wish it was understood this well. It's primarily based on play style and
Mhm.
not level of skill set. It's more like, oh, he reminds me of this type of play style. And I think that's
How
what
this
people are
guy is
getting at.
used, we can use this guy like that as well.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
think
yeah.
that's what people are getting at with the Alvin Kamara thing, but no one hears that when you hear the comp. You hear,
No,
oh, he's gonna be as good as Alvin Kamara. Oh, yeah. So
how come Ed
that's kind of
Oliver's
the
not
struggle.
leading the league in sacks? I was told he was like Aaron Donald.
Exactly. And it's like
He's a
he
bust.
is kind of like Aaron Donald play style wise, but he's not as good as Aaron Donald. So let's all pump the brakes.
Mm.
Anyways, back to the point from our tangent here. So they're all gonna complement each other. Obviously, we have the all-around guy in Devin Singletary. We have the pass catching satellite threat in James Cook, and then
Nice.
you have the power back, the short yardage guy who's just gonna churn out tough yards in Zach
Tywan
Moss.
Jones.
And that
Oh
and
God,
that's
Zach
why I
Moss.
really have belief still in Zach Moss. I've shared this take a couple of times. I think once on Cover One Buffalo and once on a
Mhm.
Madden cast. I think Zach Moss is going to have a good year this year because he's finally allowed to live in his role that is best for him. And that's just
Mhm.
being a short yardage power back. He doesn't have to be this all around amazing running back 1A in a committee. He is now truly part of a committee, but he's a role in this committee where he just has to singularly focus in on that role and be the best that he can be at that role. And I think
Mm.
his skill set is perfectly suited for short yardage, tough, get the yards where you can and work the chains, stay ahead of schedule, all that stuff. I
He's a
think a
very
lot of
good
people
zone runner, and if the Bills
he
use
is.
more zone, his zone runs at Utah were legit, and if they switch to more,
He's a surprisingly good pass catcher too. His pass catching stats, I'm assuming
oh,
you'll get
good
to it.
point. Good point. No, I wasn't going to go too
You
much
weren't?
in depth with that. I was going to talk about it from a film perspective. Yeah, he understands how to leak out. He can run some routes. He's
QB
shifty.
friendly too.
He is very QB friendly in terms of understanding space and leverage. He's got better hands. People really, really, really don't realize that. All you heard was power and pass blocking. He's a legit receiving threat out of the
Yeah.
backfield. The one, even this past year in 2021, the one against
Chargers.
Washington. I
Oh,
was thinking the Washington one from this past year where he leaks out, finds space, catches it, shifts, boom, gets
yeah.
upfield right away. Like he can be a threat there.
Yeah, 100%. So I think that's my biggest thing with holding reservations, I guess, for Zach Moss. I'm not going to do it to this extent. He's had obviously the injury struggles.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of things that have just gone against him, and we've seen the flashes, and we've also seen the flashes of negative. So I understand it, but as fans, I feel like we hold on to those negatives way more than we bolster those
Mm,
positives. And I think it's understandable as a fan base. You always want more, especially a team chasing,
yeah,
getting over the hump,
championship.
chasing the Super Bowl, all that stuff. You kind of hold those negatives in a higher regard than those positives. You don't remember they're at the forefront of your brain, all that
Yeah.
stuff. But
Yeah, when you
I
don't
still
win,
have
everybody just remembers why you didn't win
why
more
you
than
didn't
like,
win.
yeah.
Exactly. So that's why ultimately I have a lot of confidence for this room because they all
Mm,
complement each other. They all possess something. One possesses one that the other doesn't. And you can go in a circle and it just keeps continuing. So no matter what the Bills want to do, if they want to be game plan specific, they can deploy one of them 1 week.
yeah.
Or maybe if they don't even want to get game plan specific and they're literally just like, situationally specific and they're like,
Mm,
oh, this area of the field, this time of the game, they want to deploy this running back. They have the multiplicity and the versatility to do
mm.
that. And that's why I gave them a 3.7. I was honestly, I'll get to it when we get to wide receivers, but I was honestly ready to give them the second spot amongst this offensive group. I really was. I'm confident in the holistic picture for what this group is and what the team wishes to do with their deployment.
Very interesting. I'm in a very similar wavelength. I went slightly lower, but I still thought was a good grade for this group, and I'll dive into. So I gave them a 3.25. And I'll start with Devin Singletary, and you hit on some of it. I like Devin Singletary. Holistically, as a running back, at almost like every feature, facet, whatever, verbiage you want to use, he is either average to above average at almost everything as a running back, like completely. He just lacks that plus matchup feature. He doesn't have, I think he's probably closest to having a plus matchup in some of the elusiveness that he shows in tight spaces. There's times where he's able to put that foot in the ground and really just cut hard and push off. And he's got that lateral agility that he shows and that
It's
explosion.
only been in spurts, though.
Correct. It's only been in spurts. You don't see it displayed all the time, or at least regularly with consistency. And so I look at that. And again, you and I were talking about this offline. If I'm looking at like the rating on a scale of 1 to 5, a 2.5 would be like average. Like, okay, that's average. But I think, I think Steven says, I love how your grades are so specific, like a batting average. I think I'll hit 319. Yeah, we aim for specificity here on this show. And so I look at Singletary, and he's just, again, he's average to above average. And I don't mean that as a negative. There's like you mentioned, and like we spoke about here, that's fine. Like, you're not going to have an all-pro or a plus matchup at every single position, but it's nice to know that you've got a guy with a high floor. Like, if your floor is average to above average, I'll take that. You're not deficient. You're not a vulnerability. Cool. And you look at some of the metrics. So there were 91 running backs last year that had at least 50 attempts. He was 33rd in yards per attempt at 4.6. He was 44th in yards after contact per attempt, and he was 39th in EPA per attempt. So again, kind of middle of the road in a variety of ways. And before anybody jumps on it, these numbers are all very, very, very similar before Ryan Bates and after Ryan Bates. So just in case anybody wants to be like, yeah, but what was it once Bates became the starter? Very similar. They're very similar, which is why I didn't mention it, but I want to put that disclaimer in there. What is very interesting is, so according to SIS, amongst those 91, this is wild, this blew my mind. Amongst the 91 running backs with at least 50 attempts, he was 9th in points above average, which is the total of a player's EPA responsibility on rushes that distributes the credit amongst all players on the field for any given play. And then, again, amongst those 91 running backs with at least 50 carries, he was 6th in points above replacement, which is the difference between the player's points above average and that of a replacement level player at the same position in the same facet of the game. I was not expecting that level of ranking for Devin Singletary. And I think it goes to show he does have effectiveness, and he does show it in spurts. And I am cool with him being a running back in the committee. Also, something else that I dove into, I know it's also been spoken about in some circles about how, yeah, but Singletary does so much better when he gets the bulk of the carries and he can get in rhythm. I also took a dive into that. And, you know, when he was receiving the majority of the carries from week 14 roughly on, when he was seeing like, well, at least the majority of the snaps and having that opportunity to get into a rhythm, his yards per attempt and his EPA per attempt were very similar, although his EPA per attempt jumped up significantly. Granted, it was a smaller sample size from week 14 through the divisional round of the playoffs. But again, from an efficiency perspective, yards per attempt, yards after contact per attempt, they were very similar regardless of what the offensive line was, regardless of the snap share he was receiving. He is what he is, and that's fine. Like, again, I feel like it's disrespectful to say it about players, but he's just a high floor guy. He's not that high ceiling, but he's a known quantity, which is nice when you're pairing him with an unknown quantity in James Cook, someone who you and I both like, although we do have questions about what he can be in pass protection and what does he fully offer in the run game, because like we've talked about multiple times this offseason, we don't want a situation, or you don't want a situation where every time James Cook comes into the game, the defense is like, oh, cool, it's a pass. Oh, they're not running. Or, you know what? Who cares if he runs because he can't run? We'll stay with the light box. Boom. Play the pass. Play Josh Allen. They can't run on us. Boom. We're good. You don't want that. You need the whole benefit of, not the whole benefit, but the large benefit of James Cook's receiving ability is because he plays a position that is not normally known for its receiving ability. So if you have a position who excels at that and can still do the other things of a running back, that's where that multiplicity comes in. If not, he's just a receiver playing running back, which, again, can still be valuable, but you want him to be able to function as a legitimate running back who can also do receiving things. So that way the defense has to account for both. So that way the defense has to come in and be like, what do we do if Cook's in the backfield? Because he might run it and gash us, or he might line up in the slot. He might line up out wide. And again, it's all projection, but he gives you that matchup piece. He has the speed and the burst to attack light boxes. This is a guy who in 2021, 728 rushing yards, 274 receiving yards, 7 rushing touchdowns, 4 receiving touchdowns, 18 runs of 10 yards or more. He had a 90% reception percentage. He has a 10.5 career run after catch per reception. And also last year in 2021, 3.59 yards after contact per attempt, which is good. We know what he offers in that route running piece. But again, I didn't bump them up more as a position group here because he's still unproven. Ever since being a little kid and hearing how Ryan Leaf and Peyton Manning were both can't miss, and then Ryan Leaf fell off a cliff. He missed. You always have to know that, like, even the most sure things sometimes don't work out. If they did, then everybody would nail every top 10 pick and every first round pick and everything would be easy, but that's not a thing. And I love Cook's route running. It's his biggest skill set piece. He runs routes like a wide receiver. He has gears. He understands how to pace routes and read coverage and leverage. But he has to have that success in the running game, which we'll see what he can do. And then Zach Moss, we talked about it. He looked better running the ball than I thought when I went back and watched the tape. And here was the big thing. Pulled this quote from Brandon Beane when he was asked about Zach Moss and spoke about him this offseason. He said, I think Zach Moss is going to come back this year and be good. He was coming off ankle surgery from after the 2020 first round playoff victory over the Colts and couldn't cut off his left side as well as, we needed him to there in 2021. He came right out and spoke about it. And that makes sense. He was coming off of ankle surgery. We've said this multiple times throughout this offseason. He didn't look right. Again, this was a guy who, that playoff game against the Colts, much like Devin Singletary was RB1 this past year down the stretch, Zach Moss was RB1. Was RB1 in that playoff game, and then he twists the ankle and goes down against the Colts, and he's not there anymore. Zach Moss was RB1 his rookie year, which is why so many people thought, okay, well, he's healthy now. He's going to be RB1 again. And he started out strong. But then if you're thinking about it, you've got an injured ankle that you had surgery on. You're working back. He suddenly hit a wall like mid-year, and maybe some of that is due to the injury. We don't know what he went through on a day-to-day basis. But to your point, I don't think anybody should be writing Zach Moss off. I'm not saying he's going to be RB1. I'm not saying he's going to supplant either Singletary or James Cook. But Brandon Beane saying that, I think, was very insightful, very interesting. Not that he's giving him a pass, but you've got a guy who fits his own scheme, who showed talent his rookie year, who showed production his rookie year, who just didn't look right last year. Maybe it's due to that injury. And if he comes back, to your point, Kendall, you've now got a room that has multiple facets, multiple pieces, multiple matchup variations. You could come in week in and week out and be like, oh, this team goes a lot of base with heavy. Cool. This is a James Cook week. Okay. This team is going to give us light boxes and go, dime a lot. Okay. Cook hasn't been as effective as a runner yet. This is a Devin Singletary week. Or, we're in a lot of short yardage situations for whatever this game. Cool. Zach Moss is seeing a lot of work, or we're having a lot of goal line reps. Cool. Zach Moss is that guy. There's a lot of angles in which you can attack defenses when you've got this, multiple headed running back room. And I think to your point though, if they all hit, if James Cook is what we think he is, to go with Singletary's floor, and if Zach Moss gives you anything, I think this is a group that pushes up to like a 3.75 or maybe even the 4 range because they offer you a lot of variability.
Yeah, everyone always talks about which side of the ball is dictating the other, and I think without a group like this...
I said that about like 70 times this offseason.
on defense, without the kind of room the Bills have in the running back position, defenses can try to dictate what the Buffalo Bills want to do on offense. But like you said, dependent on how they are, the offense can then dictate the defense. They can be like, oh, okay, like you said, they like to live in base. We can now dictate you with what we do with James Cook. Obviously, this is all dependent on James Cook being able to pass block and break tendencies and run sufficiently, all of that stuff. But pending all of that, that's the beautiful thing to this running back group, the ability to mitigate the dictation from the defense. And that's why I'm so excited. There's so much multiplicity. There's so much variability. I really love that. I think the thing with the Zach Moss stuff too, like I feel like we harped on the idea of everyone harping on the negatives and not thinking about the positives. I feel like everyone has forgotten about that game where he single-handedly shut out the Steelers in 2020 and ran out 5.5 minutes a game clock, just continuously getting first downs. Like, there is something to be said about that bulldozing mindset, that Derrick Henry type of wear that defense out. He's not Derrick Henry. We're doing the comp thing again. there's a style of play there that the Bills need in the running back room, and there's no one else in the room that has that style other than Zach Moss, unless you want Josh Allen to do it. And I know there's a cohort of the fan base that doesn't like seeing him get hit that much. So
No,
pick your battles.
that's a very good way to put it. I think both positively and negatively, I think people are prisoners of the moment far too often. This is a very much like a "what have you done for me lately" type of thing. It's the same thing I mentioned another thing in relation to this a couple weeks ago. Like, I feel like people forgot how good Jair Alexander is as a corner for the Packers.
Oh, yeah, I
feel
saw
like
that.
People are going to be surprised when he comes back, and it's like, whoa, the Packers
Is this guy
secondary
corner
is like
one
crazy.
in the league?
Yep, like that's where he was 2 years ago. People were literally like, "Nah, I'll take Jair over Jalen Ramsey." That's how good of a year he had, especially from a man coverage perspective. And now you can use him as a chess piece. But I don't want to dive into that too much. But it goes within that notion of out of sight, out of mind, and being a prisoner of the moment, and that "what have you done for me lately" type of thing.
Yeah.
It's the reason why someone has a great week and everybody's like, "Oh my God, I want to buy this guy's jersey." And then that guy has a bad week and they're like, "Oh my God, trade him. I never want to see him on my team again." The emotions, and people are prisoners of the moment. And if you're a prisoner of the moment now, you've forgotten how good of a 2020 and rookie year that Zach Moss had. And now you're sitting there and it's like, well, it's Singletary's show and I love James Cook. Zach Moss is still there. And again, maybe it was poor play. Maybe it was due to the injury, but I don't think it's fair to write him off. I like this rhyming that Joe went with. Hopefully Kyer can be
good.
Kyer. I like that.
Last point on the Zach Moss stuff. I think an interesting thing on the Brandon Beane portion of that. I don't know if Brandon Beane would stick his neck out like that for Zach Moss if he didn't truly believe in what he was saying.
Very interesting.
He wouldn't stick his neck out and be like, yeah, he was playing injured and that's why he couldn't do the stuff that we were accustomed to seeing him do. He wouldn't put his neck out on the line for a guy he drafted. Did he trade up for Moss? I don't think he traded up for Moss.
I don't think so.
Be making that up. But either way, he wouldn't stick his neck out for a guy like that and build an excuse for a guy like that unless he had confidence that he could then.
Yeah, he would have just gone with the general coach speak. We're hoping Zach Moss comes back.
Very specific about it.
He's somebody we believe in. Yeah, he literally came in and was like, "No, it's because of this." Next question. And it's like, "Whoa, okay." Like,
also, I wanted to make sure that you answered this because I started and I saw Steven wanted an explanation on this.
So points above average, it's very similar to SIS also has like a wins above replacement, like WAR, but it's similar to kind of like the advanced metrics of baseball. If you're looking at like wins above replacement and positional value above like replacement level players. So points above average, it's mentioned a little. It's the total of a player's EPA, and EPA is expected points added. So what you have is every single play you get charted on defense and on offense individually and as a team. You basically get charted what you do on that play, how many like expected points you added. Basically, like how much closer does it drive your team towards either getting points for your team if you're on the offense or on defense. What the play that you made, how far does that go towards taking away an opportunity for points for the offense? So that's what's expected points added. Basically, literally, like how many expected points are added per play. And then you add that up holistically and on average per attempt, all that kind of stuff. And so points above average is you take the total players EPA that they're responsible for. In this case, we're talking about the running backs. We're talking the total of the players EPA that they're responsible for rushes. And then you take all that, you add it up for total points, and then it's distributed and given credit amongst all the players on the field for that given play. So the running backs, the wide receivers, the offensive line, everything. And then the totals are added up and they are mapped out to an average points scored value or that are allowed on a team level. And then also what's factored in, there's so much into it, that's factored in the player snap count, which also determines how much you should adjust that. So basically for a running back, it basically factors in the offensive line play, the direction of the run, if you're breaking tackles, fumbles, positive gains, net negatives, all that kind of stuff. So basically it's a metric and chart of what he does on a given play to simplify it and take out all the jargon. And I wanted to give you the specificity, but at the end of the day, what the really important thing you need to take away is what he does on any given play and how that tracks and trends towards the average or median level for his position. So if he is 9th in points above average out of 91 running backs, That's very good. That means what he's doing on a given play is far superior to what the average running back gives you. I realize I threw a lot out there, and I know you also know a ton about SIS, being that you are a person who works for them and charts for them. So I hope
Yes,
I did a proper service to SIS with that breakdown.
No, you did. You did a great job. You got specific, and then you also made it very consumable at the tail end. That was perfect.
I studied for it. Because I knew I was going to bring it up. And it's so funny because
anytime you use advanced metrics, you have to make sure you can explain it too, because it's really easy to just say like this number, and then this is what the number, this is the category of this number falls into.
And it's the same thing with DVOA, where people are like, well, the Bills are the number one DVOA defense, and then someone's like, well, what does it mean? And then it's like, well, they were number one,
so like you should just listen to me,
no,
but you got to
be able to explain it. And I also like, I don't want to be like a complete internet source for people, or like glossary. And I know some people can look things up, but I also don't want to be one of those people that when someone's like, well, what does that mean? And I'm like, go look it up. I'm not here to be like, you're this guy or whatever. Like, oh, boom. See, there you go, Steven. I knew, because you mentioned the batting average thing, and I know you're a baseball guy a little bit. Yeah, it's very, so SIS also has a WAR metric, but this is very similar to that. And then it factors in a whole bunch of, it basically tries to mitigate as many variables as possible to assign value.
Gets super scientific and like not volume based, like as specific as you can possibly be. Boil it down to getting rid of all of those variables, like you said, like snap counts, opportunities, everything that can boil it down to pure efficiency type stats.
That's a great way to put it. It's on that efficiency level, because which is what I like as well. That's why I love to go with like yards per attempt and make sure there's sample size.
Anything to show efficiency.
Yes. Efficiency metrics, whether raw or advanced, are much better than just pure volume statistics, because volume cannot tell the whole story to a degree. But really good question. This is part of the reason why I love you here. You started that comment. I would have never seen it because I would have lost it as I was going through stuff, even though I tried my darndest.
A great feature.
It is a great feature. I didn't know it existed until you did it maybe like a month or so ago. And I was like, what did you just do? And you're like, I started, and it shows in the top right. And I was like, oh my God.
It was the first time I did it.
That was fantastic. It was a good find. You know what else is a good find? Players at skill positions that make a difference, such as...
you were going to say Khalil Shakir.
No, I'm hopeful, fingers crossed, but I don't want to, put too much expectation on the greatest wide receiver in NFL history right out of the gate. But regardless, Stephon Diggs and Gabriel Davis, high hopes for them this year, but also potentially some questions in the rest of the wide receiver room. Not necessarily in a horrible way, but trying to figure out how the movers and shakers really go. I'm interested to see where your wide receiver group is, because you mentioned how they were close in terms of your ranking with running backs. You settled on a 3.7 for running backs. Where do you land with wide receivers in terms of your grade, their ranking, and why?
So amongst the Buffalo Bills offense, they are number 2. They are my number 2. Barely squeaked it out over the running backs. Obviously, I got some confidence in the RBs, but I got them at number 2 at 3.9. High threes. I was debating keeping that.
I love how you went even more specific. It's not even like 3.75 or 3. You're like 3.9642 or like whatever the hell. Like, I like how nice numbers. That's real.
Yeah, I tried to keep it. Yeah. So I was really close to just going like even 4 on it, but there are, like you said, questions to this group that made me dip below 4. And I think it's fair to say they should be a high threes. I'm going to be interested to see where you put this group, but obviously I love the top end. Love the top end of this group with Diggs and Davis, even lacking the foresight of what Davis will be and all the confidence the fan base has in him, all the confidence that I have in him. We still don't necessarily know what Gabe Davis is going to be when he's totally thrust into the role of wide receiver 2. I think
that's fair for people.
Yeah, I think you and I both have confidence that he'll be fine in that area. He may even totally burst expectations of fine and truly be great at wide receiver 2. But I think for that reason, I can't be like, oh yeah, our top 2 wide receivers, I'm putting them at a 5. If I'm just grading those 2 out of a 5, I'm putting them at 5. I can't do that yet because Gabe Davis is still somewhat of an uncertainty. Not a full uncertainty, but somewhat. So for that
we haven't seen a full year of him, gaining that target share, that snap count, and living in that world of wide receiver 2.
650 total yards on a season. Like, he's still unproven to an extent. So for that reason, I couldn't go totally high with the top end. With that being said, I am still confident in that top end. And then
Okay.
you get beyond that, and there is some level of concern for me with the depth. I really like all the
Mhm.
guys they added. Joel comes in with Crowder. I really like the Crowder addition. The thing I've been preaching this whole year is that he's going to be probably at worst like 80% of what Cole Beasley was at a fraction of the cost. And I will
Mm.
sign up for that every single time. A
Mhm.
fraction of the cost of Cole Beasley and getting a percentage of that, at least 3/4 of that percentage of production. I'm totally good with that. I think that makes a lot of sense. And it keeps the offense afloat. So I think it was a great signing. But he's still got to work out. He's still got to find the kinks and smooth over the kinks with the offense, learn the offense, all of that stuff. So not to say he's an unknown. I think he's a known commodity in the league, but how is he going to fit into the offense? Is he going to
Mm.
be as seamless as, oh, he's plug and play for Cole Beasley? We
Yep.
don't know that yet. I think it's fair to project that. It makes a lot of sense to project that, but it still has to work. It still has to come to fruition. So there's still that step and that uncertainty in that regard. And then everything behind Crowder and including Crowder is a slot option.
Mm.
Everyone behind Davis and Diggs is someone who lives in the slot, or at least someone who projects to be best in the slot. And this includes excuse me. This includes Shakir, McKenzie, maybe a little bit of Stevenson. There's just a lot of uncertainty in that slot
Mhm.
area. So that's kind of my biggest issue with this. If something were to happen to Diggs and Davis, who is stepping into an outside role? Because I look
Mm.
at it, and the three guys that I can actually name with any semblance of confidence to step into that outside role is Kumaro, Shakir, and Marquez Stevenson. And I'm not too confident that Stevenson is going to make the roster.
Mhm.
Kumaro hasn't really done much outside of special teams work.
Mhm.
I think he's pretty certainly on the roster because of his special teams work. I feel
Mhm.
confident enough to say that. But do you want to give him outside reps? Is he going to be your third option? If someone goes down on the outside, is he going to be the guy to step up? And then
Yeah.
for me, my preference, if that were to happen, is Shakir. But there's still questions with Shakir. Can he get off the line of scrimmage with efficiency to do that kind of
Yeah.
stuff? Does he have the long speed? Because I think his combine would tell you that he has the speed to do it. But on tape, he's not necessarily someone who plays super, super fast and would tell
Mm.
you, yeah, he's going to work on the outside, no problem. Brandon Bean alluded to it, said that he could do some stuff on the outside, but he
Mhm.
wasn't overly confident. He definitely said that his role will likely be in the slot and he would project best as a slot receiver at the next level. So I like all of these pieces that they're bringing together, even including McKenzie and the stuff that he can do. And obviously, we saw it last year what he can do in spurts when he's given the opportunity. We've seen it, but there is a level of uncertainty to literally every single player beyond Stephon Diggs. So that's
Oh, that's
why
fair.
this ultimately had to go below a 4 for me.
Mm.
I have confidence in all of these guys behind Stephon Diggs, varying levels of confidence. Obviously, Gabe Davis being the highest level of confidence behind Stephon Diggs, but they all have a level of uncertainty. So that's ultimately why I had to land at 3.9. And the fact that the group is built holistically in a very precarious way. And I didn't even include Tavon Austin, another guy that's probably going to wind up as a slot option. I don't know if he can still work on the outside. Fingers crossed that he can. I mean, if he
Yeah.
makes the roster, I'd hope it's for that reason and return capabilities. But we're not
Mhm.
necessarily grading this group on return capabilities. And even if we are, I'm not even sure that any of them are going to win the job. Who knows? Maybe it's going to be Micah Hyde. Maybe it's going to be James Cook. Like,
It's all
who
a question.
knows? So
Mhm.
that's the biggest reason that this grade fell below a 4. It's ultimately just my level of confidence and the level of uncertainty that I have with everyone behind Diggs.
I think that's fair. And I'm in a similar boat. I gave them a 3.75, which was number 2 for me out of this position group. So a quarterback was 1, and then we differ a little in wide receiver and RB. So wide receiver was my 2, running back was my 3. And yeah, it starts with, I wanted to talk about Diggs just briefly because I know people talked about his usage last year and, we need to get Diggs the ball more and yada, yada. He was 5th in targets in the 2021 regular season. He was 8th in receptions. He was tied for 6th in touchdowns. He was 30th out of 199 wide receivers in yards per route run, which is still really good. We know what he is. He's an easy top 10 receiver in this NFL. In the NFL, he's arguably top 5. He's arguably the best route runner. He is a true wide receiver 1. And then you look at Gabriel Davis, his 2021 regular season. So I didn't want to get too much into these top 2 guys, but somebody who you look at the numbers. So amongst wide receivers with at least 20% of the targets, he was tied for 10th in yards per reception. He was tied for 18th in, or higher, actually be 8th in touchdowns. The divisional round versus Kansas City, which we know, 4 touchdowns, which is the most receiving touchdowns all time in a playoff game. He finished that game with 8 catches for 201 yards, 4 touchdowns. His ability to get vertical versus single high and split safety looks is something I'm a huge fan of. He's a great blocker. He gives you multiplicity on offense because if he's coming in motion or if he's lined up tight to the formation, you don't know if it's going to be run or pass because he literally can crash down and crack down on an edge. He can dig out second and third level defenders, or he can make it look like he's doing one of those things and then get out into a route and gouge you for 15 plus yards. He is a power slot option who can also work on the outside. Clearly, he just gives you a lot of versatility. But to your point, I have questions for what the rest of the wide receiver group looks like. And I'll start with Jamison Crowder. My biggest question right now is, can he stay healthy? Cole Beasley, for all of the injuries that he had the past couple of years, he never saw less than 681 snaps in his 3 years in Buffalo. Never saw less than 681. Crowder has seen less than 600 3 of his last 4 years. And all of the injuries that he's missed time with or been banged up with have been all to his wheels. Ankle injuries, hamstring, groin, calf, all to the points that you need to be a good or consistent or sustainable option in the NFL. You cannot have a busted wheel. So that's not good. Can he stay healthy? And another piece I wanted to bring up, I know everybody talks a lot about his yards after catch, and I do think he offers you a better yards after catch potential than Cole Beasley. But career yards after catch per reception for Jamison Crowder, okay, 5.3. Career yards after catch per reception for Cole Beasley, 4.6. So 0.7 difference between Beasley and Crowder. No, it is not much. Again, when you break it down, yards after catch per reception. Now, there are factors that can go into that, but I do think Crowder is better yards after catch. He offers some more explosivity with the ball in his hand than Beasley. But don't get it twisted. Do not think that this is, oh my God, like once he gets the ball in his hands, it's over. He's taken off. Like I keep seeing all the people who talk about, the yards after catch, and is such a better option than Beasley, such a better option. They're more similar than they are different in yards after catch, although Crowder, again, is the better option there. And then
right, it's objectively an upgrade, but how much of an upgrade?
Yes. The difference is closer to being negligible than it is like you're not adding. I feel like people are thinking like, well, the Bills just got like, it's going to be like having Deebo Samuel with what his yards after catches, and it's not that.
It's just not.
It's not. But I do like Crowder. Again, I think he is a known quantity when healthy. He understands how to leverage space. I don't think he has the sharpness or suddenness that Cole Beasley does in his routes. I think Beasley's a better route runner and has that sharpness to his game. But Crowder is still very good. If you're losing Cole Beasley and you're replacing him with Jamison Crowder, again, I would rather have Beasley, but I don't think it's, oh my God, well, this position is just a complete hole now. No, Crowder is a very good spot. But again, there's questions about how does he fit? Because we haven't seen it. 2, can he stay healthy? And then after that, you're looking at Isaiah McKenzie. And everybody talks about the success that he had against the Patriots in that 1 week. There is a reason why he went off in that game and has not gone off in others. The New England Patriots played a lot of man coverage and a lot of single high coverage in that game in New England against Buffalo. And they did that, which meant that Miles Bryant was going to be matched up one-on-one with Isaiah McKenzie. And Miles Bryant, that is a mismatch all day, which is why the Bills attacked it. They spammed it. They went after it. In a similar way that they realized in Buffalo against Miami, that game on Halloween, when they realized that Nick Needham could not cover Cole Beasley one-on-one, and they spammed the match of that entire second half against Cole Beasley. People forget about that game where Miami was giving it to Buffalo. It was super close. And then all of a sudden at halftime, the Bills realized, wait a minute, they're staying one-on-one with Needham on Beasley. We're going to attack that all day. Beasley had over 100 receiving yards, completely changed that game. Again, it is about matchups. There is a reason why Beasley went off in that, or I'm sorry, there's a reason why Beasley went off in that game against Miami. There's a reason why McKenzie went off in that game against New England. Now, This isn't a negative for McKenzie. He's not Beasley. He's not Crowder. He is his own player. He offers a skill set and traits that neither of those guys have. He also doesn't have several of the skill sets and traits they have. He is not a like for like replacement for Cole Beasley at all. And that's not a negative to McKenzie. Him and Cole Beasley are two different players. I like what Isaiah McKenzie offers you. I love his burst. I love the speed. I love the agility. I love the toughness. I love the option he adds. You can line him up in multiple spots. He's versatile with his alignments. You can line him up in the backfield, slot, outside, short motion, long, jet, orbit, whatever have you. Gives you a lot of potential and possibility. We've never seen him in a full wide receiver 3 role. So I don't know necessarily what that's going to look like, but I like, again, you're looking to kind of patchwork together this slot role. I like having Crowder and McKenzie and Shakir potentially, and you figuring out what it can be. But I just don't want everybody. I feel like everybody's getting so high and be like, well, Crowder can do exactly what Beasley did, or McKenzie's just been the guy waiting in the wings and now he's going to kill it. And he very well may be. But again, I just don't want those expectations. There's a reason why in the 2019 offseason, he signed a 1-year, $962,000 deal with the Bills. There's a reason why in the 2021 offseason, he signed a 1-year, $1.12 million deal with the Buffalo Bills. There's a reason why as a free agent this offseason, he signed a 2-year, $4.4 million deal with the Bills. He's not getting those long-term or large value contracts. And I think he lacks certain abilities, but then again, he's a plus matchup in other areas. Using him in a combination with Crowder and then Khalil Shakir, I'm still, want to know how he translates to the NFL, but we've talked about him so much, his route running, his nuance, his savviness, his intelligence. I'm very excited for him and the outside potential. 32.4% of his snaps came out wide as a college player. He's 6 feet, 196 pounds. He's thick. He's stocky. You got to see how he adjusts to NFL length and size and speed and press man, and just press in general and given less options to work and, less space to work with. But I like what he can do as well. But again, all of those, you said it great. Diggs is the known quantity. I feel confident in Gabriel Davis, but you can make the case that he's an unknown quantity playing as a wide receiver too for a full year. Can Crowder stay healthy? What does Isaiah McKenzie look like if he gets more on his plate? What does Khalil Shakir look like coming into the NFL? Is Marquez Stevenson anything? Is Isaiah Hodgins anything? Can Kumaro maybe be something because Aaron Rodgers likes him so much? Is Tanner Gentry the future? Like there's all these questions.
Forgot about Tavon Austin again.
There you go. I did forget about Tavon Austin, who I like, and his interview.
Yeah, I know, really. All joking aside.
I'm wishing him the best. And he's another guy who he says that he's healthy after not being healthy for years. He stopped returning punts in 2017 because his wrist was so messed up, and now his wrist is healthy. Like there's all these little ins and outs. But again, I think holistically, top to bottom, there's enough of a high floor and known quantity for everyone, but I'm very interested to know how it all forms and fits together in terms of usage, both in terms of like snap share and rates, but then actual execution and production, seeing what they're going to be. Because it's you don't have someone who is holistically built to be a full-time starting slot like you did Cole Beasley. I think Crowder is very close to that, but his injury history is significant. Like if he's fully healthy, I'm much more confident in this group, but I do have questions about his health given what he's been. Again, that's significant. Like everybody talks about Cole Beasley and how he was hurt and injured and this and that. Never saw less than 681 snaps. Never in his 3 years in Buffalo. Crowder has seen less than 600 snaps 3 out of his last 4 years because of a variety of injuries, all to his wheels. No bueno, as the Spanish like to say, but we'll see.
I think an interesting point that you brought up with the whole Crowder injury thing, it kind of makes me rethink, the Buffalo Bills idea of building out this room. Perhaps that was a reason why they brought in so many slot receivers, because they didn't know what the health was going to be for Crowder. They were like, okay, we feel confident that we can get some work out of him this year, but are we going to get a full year out of him? We need to have an insurance policy behind him. Little did they know they got 3 or 4 insurance policies behind him. But either way, I think there is perhaps something to that. But I think that's an interesting point beyond that. And I mean, I am excited for this group, and I think it can come together in a really, really good way. But there is just a level of uncertainty. And I do have a lot of confidence for guys like Shakir, guys like Gabe Davis. But they have to prove that still. And I think lesser for Gabe Davis than Shakir, but they still have to prove that. And I think that's the big thing keeping me from ranking this group higher, and perhaps even yourself ranking this group higher. There's a little bit of redundancy in this group, and then a little bit of uncertainty with this group. So that's the big reservation for me.
I second that notion. I also like this question from Jason saying, if we need another outside receiver, if Diggs or Davis misses meaningful time, could you see them re-signing Sanders? I most definitely could. If he's in shape, I could see him being like signing in like October or November. Right. Even if everybody's healthy, maybe he's just a piece to add. I think he can still ball. I just think he kind of doesn't want to, or he's waiting in the wings because he doesn't want to go to training camp, which you see a lot of vets at his age start to do. But I would take him back in a heartbeat. I love what he added to the wide receiver room from a mentality perspective. And he's another one too. Everybody remembers the year of how Davis ended, and everybody's like, well, Sanders was blocking him for the whole year. Imagine what he would have done. Sanders was balling out
was good
in the beginning of the year. Sanders was balling out. And then he wasn't ready to come back from his injury, but he still came out and played against New England in New England, and then went back to not playing so he could rest and get healthy for the playoffs. I know he wasn't what everybody wanted him to be down the stretch, but he had a killer, especially if you want to talk to fantasy football people. Emmanuel Sanders was the guy that people were trading for in the beginning of the year because of all the tutties he was putting up and the receptions and the target share that he had. So I could see him coming back, and he speaks so highly of the Bills and Sean McDermott and Josh Allen. Like, I could see him being a nice fit. Moving on to our last two groups, we're starting with the tight ends, led by Mr. Dawson Knox. But this is an interesting group. We actually went into the tight end group a bit in last week's Film Room episode when we broke down Dawson Knox's 2021, and we touched on this group a bit. So what do you got for the tight ends in terms of ranking, grade, and the whys behind it?
So I got the tight ends as group number 4 in the offense. Same. I have them at 3.4. I'm basing on where I've been and where you've been. I feel like I'm slightly inflated from what your grade is.
You're a little higher than me, yes.
Yeah, but we will see exactly what your number is. Yeah, so I'm at 3.4. I like them above average. I think the group is above average. I'm very comfortable with Knox, everything that we've got from Knox. If you want to know our full thoughts on Knox, go back and watch our Film Room on it. Shameless plug, of course.
I'll say nice plug.
But there is still a level of uncertainty, much like Gabe Davis. It's not a big level of uncertainty. Like, I'm still very, very confident in Dawson Knox, but he's a unfinished commodity, not an unknown commodity, but he's unfinished. We don't know perhaps what that ceiling is, what he can be. Is he already at his ceiling? All of those kind of questions. We don't necessarily know that yet, but we know at least probably what the floor is going to be for Dawson Knox, and I'm comfortable with that. And I'm comfortable with saying that's above average. So that's really where I think the bulk of this grade comes from. The fact that it is as high as 3.4, that stems with Dawson Knox. All right. So the big thing is that level of uncertainty really stems from just 1 year of production. Because let's be honest, while he did have production as a starter before this past year, it was up and down. There were peaks, there were valleys. This was the first year that he was truly consistent, and he even faced an injury throughout the year, and he came back and he was still consistent. So I think that is a very, very good sign for him moving forward. Onto the depth, though. The depth is interesting because I really love the OJ Howard signing and the reclamation project that it is, but it still ultimately has to pan out. Like, this dude was an older prospect coming out of college. He was a prospect that was highly, highly, highly regarded, but he's someone that hasn't really panned out. And you start to question, was he just really good in college because he was just older than all the young kids he was playing against? Or was he truly just better than everyone else? And it kind of makes you ask those questions and use it as a case study as younger players in the draft versus older players in the draft, all of that kind of stuff, the little minutia to that. But specifically to the Buffalo Bills, it's very, very interesting because we wonder, with all of these slot additions, are they all competing for a role that's going to be watered down because they anticipate 12 personnel this year? But see, another thing, I know, right? Another thing to this, though, this is all in theory. Like 12 personnel, getting into 12 personnel more and dictating defenses to roll a safety down, get out of too high shells, and respect what the Bills are doing from a personnel standpoint, and perhaps cover run fits, all of that stuff. dictating the defense to do that kind of stuff with 12 personnel is all great in theory. But OJ Howard has to do it. He actually has to realize this role and realize this theory and make it come to fruition instead of just keeping it as a hypothetical theory. Because in theory, it's a great idea to keep defenses honest to what the Bills actually want to do. In the first half, yeah, let's run a lot of 12 personnel, make them bring a safety forward. Let's do all this stuff, make them respect the run. And then when they least expect it, we're going to come out in this look and we're going to have a play action shot play and we're going to get a 70-yard touchdown to Stephon Diggs. Like, all of that theory is really great, but OJ Howard has to be good enough to actually take snaps away from whoever's in the slot to actually make this theory come to work. So that's kind of my biggest issue with the tight end room. I love the idea of making this signing because there still is so much untapped potential with OJ Howard, but he still has to prove it. And by all accounts, according to Mike Florio, he's not ready to push Dawson Knox for a starting role. So is he even ready for a backup role? Who knows? So I think it is actually interesting to see how ready he will actually be. If he is actually going to be everything that we've dubbed him to be this offseason, this great signing, really good insurance policy for Dawson Knox, but also someone that allows you to play 12 personnel, all of that stuff. Very, very interesting. So I like it, but there's still uncertainty there. It still has to pan out. And then beyond that, talk about uncertainty. I mean, should Reggie Gilliam be included in this group?
For me, no. I think he's still more fullback than tight end. Or the closest I'll get towards tight end for him is H-back. Like, I'll push him in that role. But no,
he wasn't included in my grading, but I didn't know if I should talk about him in this segment or not. But like that third tight end, I don't even know if we're even going to bring one in. Like, if we bring one in, it's between Sweeney and Weidermeyer, right? Like,
Quentin Morris, maybe?
I don't see Quentin Morris making the roster. I see him as a guy that's probably going to sit on the practice squad and potentially usurp Reggie Gilliam's role if Reggie Gilliam doesn't get re-signed.
I just love how he looks from like a stature standpoint. Like, you just look at him on the field and he's just like, he's a unit. Like, you just look like, you're like, that guy can play football.
But he's a shorter guy, which kind of strikes me as like that H-back type of tight end.
A little bit.
He seems like that move type of tight end. So,
which, yeah, I would agree. I think he's more in that role. But he, again, to your point, like, Sweeney was not as good of a replacement for Knox as we had hoped for last year when Knox missed time. And I'm not even thinking of it from a receiving perspective, because you're not going to touch Knox in that level. Because
just realistically.
Yes, for me, it was the blocking aspect. Like, everything about Sweeney was he's got great hands. He's limited as an athlete, but he's got great hands and he's a great blocker. We watched him struggle in pass protection. We watched him drop passes. And I was like, great. So the two things that are a known quantity for him, he struggled with. So, I mean, is it him? Is it Quentin Morris? Is it Weidermeyer, who set all these records at Texas A&M, but then had a horrible 40 time and a horrible RAS, and everybody's like, well, this guy's, dead in the water, and then he gets picked up. Length, size, and an understanding of how to run routes and get open and catch touchdowns. There's always value for guys like that, but exactly to your point, it's another question that you're asking with this.
It's just a question. I mean, I did like what I saw on the tape from Weidermeyer. Everything I've heard from like draft nerds about what they saw on tape from Weidermeyer, they were thoroughly underwhelmed. And then when I watched it, I was like, this guy's in that underwhelming. He's certainly not the tight end one of this class that he was made out to be.
That's why it's
they
underwhelming.
Went into the tape with those kind of expectations, and I watched it with the expectations of, oh, this guy's not even going to get drafted, and I was like, he should get drafted. He was preseason and even like September, October-ish tight end one for everyone. And then he was a dude I was watching big nickels, like big safety box type safeties in 2020 against Texas A&M, because I knew I wanted to find guys that could cancel out Kelsey. And I was specifically finding guys that were playing Texas A&M for Weidermeyer. And here we are 2 years later and he's undrafted. But I mean, he's a question. I do think he has an outside shot to make this team, but it doesn't make a lot of sense for the Bills to keep three tight ends, given what they've done with Tommy Sweeney, given what they've done with Reggie Gilliam. There are different flexible ways that they can work a third tight end into this group without actually rostering a specific third tight end. So I really wonder if this group is even going to go past OJ Howard.
I think that's very fair. And again, this is a team that I tweeted this a couple nights ago. The Bills in 12 personnel usage in 2021 were last in the league at 7%. They were 31st in the league in 2020 and 2019, both of those years at 9%. Now, maybe that's because they didn't have the personnel. Maybe it's because of how successful their 11 and 10 personnel packages were. But this has been a team under Brian Dable at the very least that has used a lot of 2 tight end sets. Maybe Ken Dorsey wants more of that. For me, you mentioned the execution pieces for OJ Howard. For me, it's just the health.
Yeah, that's fair.
Going back, so from his career starting in 2017, 55.6% of snaps in 2017, 39.1% in 2018, 68.4% in 2019, 12.3% in 2020 when he tore his right Achilles, and then 30.9% last year when he was healthy, but he was still working back from that Achilles. They had Gronk and Cameron Bray, and Bruce Arians just like to have his tight ends block.
Yeah.
Unless you're Gronk, who is an anomaly. I'm interested just to see how healthy he is. If he's healthy, I think he can be useful. But if he's not, and he keeps getting banged up, he's got that injury concern. And then even if he is healthy, you're thinking like, okay, can he reach that ceiling? Can he reach that potential? And you look at what he's mainly been for somebody who was like this mismatch and weapon nightmare at Bama, snaps by alignment for his career, 32.7% in the slot, Dawson Knox 36.3%. Out wide, 7.4 for OJ Howard, 11.9 for Dawson Knox. And then in line, big difference, 59.2 for OJ Howard, 42.6 for Dawson Knox. OJ Howard has been the typical hip tight end who's attached in some form or fashion to the line of scrimmage. He's that inline guy. Again, a lot of it is formed by how Bruce Arians likes to use his tight ends in Tampa Bay, which is primarily as blockers, again, unless you are Gronk or unless you have Tom Brady and he tells you what he wants. But we haven't really seen, again, OJ Howard even scratched that surface. He had a decent rookie year and made some big plays, but hasn't really hit on those levels that everybody had thought he would, given what we saw at Alabama. So I think he's a question mark. Dawson Knox, I really like Dawson Knox. Obviously, we all do. And I'm interested to see what his trajectory continues to be. Does he climb up into the realm of top 5 tight ends? I think he's top 10 right now. How much higher does he go? How much does he plateau or continue on that trajectory towards reaching his ceiling? For all those things, and then again, like we talked about, all the questions after OJ Howard. OJ Howard is a question. And then after him, you have even more questions. This group is my number 4 group. I gave them a 3 flat out, mainly because of the top-heavy nature of Dawson Knox. I think he carries the group. And then I do like what OJ Howard has. I think he will be solid in a tight end 2 role. And I'm excited for that 12 personnel potential, which may not even come like we've talked about, but I like what it potentially represents given the ability that he still has, and what he can do is just a matter of if he stays healthy when it comes to, that tight end room and that tight end group. And now we wrap up with our last group, which, spoilers, the offensive line is last for both of us.
For both of us.
It's a matter of what grade they get and the whys behind it. So Kendall, offensive line, why are they your 5th out of the 5 position groups on the Bills offense? And what rating did you give them?
Well, the why is because they didn't draft Dylan Parham. As 2 people who were just livid on draft night that Dylan Parham was drafted.
Really believe.
It's not shocking that we both went last for this.
No. And much like last year when I was sitting there being like, oh, well, Creed Humphrey. And then it was like Boogie Basham. And I was like, what?
Excuse me, Roger.
Excuse me? I'm sorry, what? Did you say the wrong name? That's a weird way to pronounce Creed Humphrey. It's same thing with this year. I was like, oh my God, we were doing the show. Parham fell. We were all ready to
literally every single pick for like a round and a half.
We were just like Parham. And then he fell. And then, of course, just like Creed Humphrey, he literally goes with the next pick. He goes to the Raiders right after the Bills. And I just hope he doesn't. Well, for his sake, I hope he develops. But I hope it's not another thing where we're sitting there being like, glad we took Terrell Bernard instead of Dylan Parham. Just like glad we took Boogie Basham instead of Creed Humphrey. Granted, everybody's still very young. We have to see what Basham is going to be and so on and so forth. But yeah, I digress.
Still got a lot of gripes with that. But either way, I mean, it really doesn't stem from that. But I do find it funny that we both had him last and we both wanted Dylan Parham in the draft. The real stem of this comes from I gave them a 3 flat. I gave them a flat 3. Okay. What you gave the tight ends. So I'm confident in pieces of it. So I'm going to talk it out in tiers. So
You're gonna cry? That's weird.
Nice.
That's a weird
That's
reaction.
good.
Thanks.
Well done. So tier 1, first drop is Dawkins and Morse. That is the first tier of this. So those are the two guys where it's like, yeah, I got confidence in these dudes. These are the two starters where set it and forget it. Plug and play. These guys, no problem with the blind side, no problem with the guy calling protections up front, helping Josh Allen identify things, all of that stuff. It's very set it and forget it. I have tons of confidence in those two guys. Obviously, those are the guys I believe locked up with the most money. So it makes the most sense,
most definitely.
right? So moving on to the next tier. The next tier is the projected starters of Bates, Saffold, and Spencer Brown. So these three guys are all guys that I have varying levels of confidence in. And it's all for different reasons, because I am confident that holistically it can come together and be a slightly above average group, but there are different levels of confidence with these three guys. As for Bates specifically, he obviously did well last year at the tail end of last year, but it's on a small sample size, and that's really all that needs to be said about this. Like, I like what he is. I like the spark that he added to this group. I like the athleticism that he added to this group, and I think he can even grow on that. And Aaron Cromer is going to come up probably 10 times in this segment, and I love the fact that he gets to work with this kind of athletic specimen in Ryan Bates. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see if he can grow off of what he did last year. So I'm hopeful, but there are questions with Ryan Bates, and specifically the questions of sample size. Can he stay consistent, stay dependable, be someone that is a dependable starter on this offensive line? And you move forward to Roger Saffold. Great career, great tenacity, great tone setter on the offensive line. But his decline his career has declined recently amidst some injuries, and specifically his shoulders. Like, for whatever reason, he's had multiple shoulder surgeries, like seemingly nerve damage.
Well, he's been a lineman for like 12 years. He's like 33, 34. Like, you're bound to
getting hit literally every time you're on the field. So I wonder if he will reclaim what his former self was, if he'll get back to even a large percentage of that. But I am confident that even a shell of himself is better than what we had at the guard spots. So that's why I'm okay with it, and I still consider the group holistically to this point above average, and I think we made upgrades, but how much are those upgrades going to impact, and is it anything more than marginal? So still some questions with those two guys. And then the third guy is obviously Spencer Brown. He's a budding young bookend, but his rookie year had a lot of lumps, like real peaks and valleys, real moments where it's like, man, this dude is physical. He's a tone center. He gets out in space. He's super athletic. He can do a lot of things that you want him to do, but he really has to refine his game, his technique, his understanding, his IQ, all of that stuff. It just needs to get better. He needs to get to that next step. But will he get to that next step? So that's the biggest reason why this group wouldn't have been graded any higher than 3 for me. It's because there's really only 2 guys that I have supreme levels of confidence in. The other 3, it's confidence, but it's reserved confidence. It's almost like optimistically or cautiously optimistic with those 3 guys. And that's the problem. I have optimism with, especially like moving out to the future with Bates and Brown, but there's still questions. And then moving on to the depth, I really, really liked the Questenberry signing. I actually did really like that signing. Makes sense. We were all struggling to figure out, is Tommy Doyle the backup swing tackle? Is that really the plan? Like, this dude really only got snaps as the tight end in jumbo sets. So what is the plan here? So I like that they got some insurance there at the very least. Like, if he can't even make the roster, that means he pushed Tommy Doyle to make the roster, and that's positive. So I like it from that perspective. And then furthermore, I think the last guy that I should really even bother spending time on is Cody Ford. I think Cody Ford is still someone who obviously a lot of fans have given up on. It's probably going to be a very similar conversation to the Zach Moss stuff, where you just remember the negatives. But I mean, there were moments in this past preseason where he was truly balling out.
He looked
Like,
very
he
good in
had
the preseason.
a very, very good preseason this last year. So there are obviously portions of this where you can still see there's something in the tank. There's something that you're working with, the traits, the size, the athleticism. He has those abilities. And I mean, this is a guy that was looked at as a bona fide first rounder for a lot of draft scouts. Like, there were a lot of people that like this
The
guy
Bills got plus grade after plus grade for getting him
for
in the second round.
that pick. Yeah, specifically like trading up to go get that guy, like showing the aggressiveness to be like, oh, this guy is falling. We should scoop him up before someone else comes to their senses. They got commended for it.
Guard
And
tackle flexibility,
yeah,
like yada
all
yada.
of
Oh my
that stuff.
goodness.
So it's really tough projecting him forward given everything we know and our perceptual set as a fan base with what we know about Cody
Yeah.
Ford. But you come back to Aaron Kromer and you give him one last shot, last year, contract year with the Buffalo Bills. You want to see what Aaron Kromer can do. And at the absolute worst, you're thinking, sure, he can be a quality backup for a team that's on the precipice of the Super Bowl. And I think that's sufficient for him. It's like sufficient for him right now relative to expectations, but it's certainly not sufficient to, draft day
Correct the
expectations. So
value.
you wonder what Aaron Kromer is going to be able to squeeze out of that stone, like we like to say. But the group holistically, to me, in my head, it's just relying on Dawkins and Morse. And that's why I simply cannot get any higher than a 3. And I'm expecting you to be in the 2s because I mean we were both pretty upset on draft day with the lack of investment into this group.
Yeah, again, we'll see what Terrell Bernard can be. I just thought Parham was an easy choice. You get the guard center versatility. He can compete right now for a starting spot and then potentially take over as early as next year. And just his tape was tremendous. We both liked him a lot. And again, based on the need, I thought he was there. We'll see what Terrell Bernard can be. We'll see what Parham can be. Neither a one or a slam dunk. We got to see him play. But, in a similar vein, I'm close to a 3, but I am on the shorter end of it. They are my 5th rated group on this offense. I gave them a 2.75. And again, for me, like a 2.5 is average or the middling. So if there's 32 offensive line groups, 2.5 is like being roughly around like 16th. And I think this offensive line holistically as a group is slightly above average. So 2.75 to me, like we talked about offline, puts them into like the 14, 13, 12-ish kind of range on any given week. And it starts with Dawkins, who was 7th amongst all offensive tackles last year in pass block win rate. Mitch Morse was 8th for centers in pass block win rate. As a team last year, they were 8th in terms of pass block win rate. And pass block win rate is a measure of how long linemen can sustain their block, specifically if they can sustain their block for 2.5 seconds or longer. And granted, we know Josh Allen made up for a lot of the deficiencies on the offensive line. But there was some positive play last year. The problem is there was that positive play, and then there were those dips, and then positive play. There was too much roller coaster performance from the Buffalo Bills offensive line. Things started to stabilize a little bit towards the end of the year with the injection of Ryan Bates into the lineup. But this is the team last year who struggled to run the ball for the majority of the year, whether it was running backs, whether it was offensive line. And this offensive line last year was 23rd as a team in run block win rate. And that, again, similar to pass block win rate, but it uses angles, distances, and speed, throughout the execution of a run play to tell who's blocking who, and determining whether or not the defender was able to meaningfully beat the block or individually or in double teams. So that's what run block win rate is measuring. And this group was decent enough last year. They had some moments where they shine and they had some moments where they really struggled. I think the additions that they have this offseason, I like Roger Saffold. I like the physicality that he adds. I like the mental side of the game. Mitch Morse talked about it during OTAs about his communication ability and his dialogue and all the conversations that they're having and what he brings. I really like that signing. I think Roger Saffold adds a lot to this offensive line from the mental side, from the leadership side, and from the run blocking perspective. The Bills are automatically a better run blocking team because of the addition of Roger Saffold. Yeah. However, there are questions in his pass protection. He is a little bit older. It's so weird with his athleticism and his explosion and burst, because when it comes to the run, he is athletic as hell. Yeah, going forward, he is fast and quick and agile. He gets out of the gates. But if it's that lateral agility, you start to see a little bit slower feet. He's
Very
heavy in
weird.
his feet. Yeah, you see it when teams really start to attack with stunts and twists. Like, he can read it, but if he's slightly late, his feet aren't going to get him there, and his legs aren't going to get him there. But if he gets his hands on you, it's over for you, pass or run. His hands and you just look at him like he is a specimen. Like, he looks like Godzilla. Like, he's a monster of a man, and he's got powerful hands. He's got pop and explosion and violence in those hands, which is why he's so good in the run, because once he gets those hands on you, it's over, and then he drives and you're done. But he can struggle in that pass protection piece. But what I think helps him is playing between Deion Dawkins and Mitch Morse and being able to have that communication factor. I think that helps raise his floor potentially a little bit. And with the addition of Aaron Cromer, who's the great equalizer. Then you've got Ryan Bates, who we all like. But again, I think you made the excellent point. I don't want to drive it home too much. That sample size, right? What does he look like with a full season as a starter? Because we broke down efficiency metrics multiple times this offseason. Bates definitely helped. He was definitely better in stabilizing this offensive line. But overall metrics, from a total pressure standpoint, from a run blocking perspective, yards per attempt and all of that, attacking light boxes, regular boxes, everything, and so on and so forth, the efficiency metrics didn't change too much with the injection of Ryan Bates. To the eye, it looked better, but it was still holistically similar and on par with what the line was prior, although it did definitely improve. And after that, again, you're looking at the Quessenberries. Eichbacher probably doesn't see time this year because of his injury.
Right,
you're looking at Mance. You're looking at Cody Ford and Tommy Doyle. And I don't know, does Luke Tenuta come through and get, there's all these questions about everybody down the depth chart. But I think there's questions, exactly like you said, there's questions amongst the starting offensive line that isn't Deion Dawkins and Morse. There's questions, right? And then there's questions even more once you get to the depth pieces, the second stringers, the third and the fourth stringers. And then rounding it all out for the starters, that Spencer Brown piece, he had, Steven mentioned it earlier. He had a rough game at times against Kansas City. There's that one where we applauded Josh Allen for scrambling and, evading Melvin Ingram. Melvin Ingram gets upfield with 2 steps, cuts inside and just clubs Spencer Brown and takes him down, and Spencer Brown crumbles and goes down. There was way too much of that in his rookie year. There were times when you saw the athleticism and the physicality and you were like, yes, that guy is the future. Awesome. And then there were times where he's just getting beat, whether it's on the outside on a speed rush or he's getting set up outside and beat inside, and you see improper hand placement and improper footwork, which again, I don't want to drill home too much on that as a negative. He was not supposed to play last year. Spencer Brown, as stated by Brandon Beane, was supposed to be the swing tackle, get some experience. He was supposed to be that, extra tight end or extra offensive lineman in those sets. He was not supposed to be starting at right tackle. The only way he was going to was if the offensive line kind of fell apart, and the offensive line did kind of fall apart, and adjustments had to be made. He should not have been playing last year, but you got a guy who's very green, very raw, lacks experience, but tons of upside because of his athleticism and tenacity. My big question for the offensive line really is how much. It's not about Spencer Brown reaching his ceiling in 2022. For me, it's how far does he get from his floor in 2022?
Love that.
How much does he start to show consistency and sustainability? All those technical pieces, the hand placement, the eyes, the recognition of twists and stunts, getting across the face of his man and not just making plays in space because of how athletic he is, but making plays at the point of contact. How does he maintain his leverage? All of those things, right? Like the technical piece of actually playing offensive line that isn't just, I'm big, I'm an athlete, I'm fast, watch me blow up this guy in space. No, I want to see the technical pieces that are indicators of sustainability and your ability to show longevity in terms of being able to play football. So that's what the big question mark for me with this group is. How far away does he get from that floor? I think we're still ways away from seeing him reach a ceiling, because his ceiling is immense. How far away does he get from that floor? And I think it's a fair question, because there were times where he flashed last year and it was awesome. There were also times where he was a vulnerability for Josh Allen. And when you've got a group with these type of aspirations and expectations, and you've got quality players everywhere, you just need stability. You cannot have oh man, he looked great, and the next play you're like, oh God, get this dude out of the game. Like, you can't have that. You can just you can't get blown up and completely beat. You can't fall down within 0.5 seconds on a pass protection snap. Like, you can't have that. You need to be a known quantity and not get blown up. And there was, again, to his credit, he shouldn't have even been on the field. I think he performed better than at least for me, than I would have thought in his rookie year, considering, him playing 8-on-8 football in high school and then playing at Northern Iowa and then opting out during the COVID year and then coming into the draft.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's very green, very raw, and he handled himself well at times. And then other times you were like, okay, I see it. I see the guy that needed more seasoning and who should have had time to learn and study and prepare. Now, again, like we mentioned, Aaron Kromer, I think, is the great equalizer. If anybody is going to improve this line right off rip, it's Aaron Kromer. I've said it so many times this offseason. He raises everyone's floor. He raises everyone's ceilings. He's a huge boost and a huge boon for this offense. In the same fashion with Cody Ford, if anybody's going to get that blood out of the Cody Ford, oh, yikes. If anybody is going to get that blood out of the Cody Ford stone, it's Aaron Kromer. I trust in him and I believe in him. And we know Saffold likes him, and we're already hearing rave reviews from Mitch Morris and the guys. So I think that's a big piece with it too, right? Like, I think Kromer elevates everyone, and I wanted to give this group a higher rating, but right now I just think there's too many variables and there's too many question marks all over, both at the starting level and then second, third. Because again, it's not just like, oh, there's questions for depth, but we'll see. No, there's questions at the starting level throughout second tier, third tier, everything. Like, no matter what you're looking at, there's significant question marks. And I think this can be a group that can be a top 12-ish unit, which is fine given what Josh Allen can do. Josh Allen covers up for a lot of mistakes, and then you've got the weapons on the outside. You don't need this group to be a top 5 group. If they are, fantastic, awesome. But you don't need that. You just need them to be in that 12 to 15 range without having weeks where they look like they're a bottom 5 group. Just don't be deficient. Don't be vulnerable. And again, overall, I think, how do they fit together? How do they perform? What does the scheme and the system look like that they run with Kromer and Dorsey? What's being implemented? I think that's a big question mark too, as of this point. And for me, that's why they were, last out of, the 5 position groups on the offense, and why they had a 2.75 rating. But overall, I think that's fair. And I think also, I'm going to throw up the banner that says "Toodles, you guys." And why I'm doing that is because we're starting to wind down here on this episode here on Disguised Coverage. I want to thank everybody who joined us live on this episode. The chat, as always, was jumping. Very engaging. A lot of great questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, everything. Kendall and I appreciate you guys riding with us. If you're still here live, please drop a like on this video. It goes a long way towards helping myself and the entire Cover One team to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears. If you are listening to this podcast episode on any of the podcasting apps or platforms, specifically Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please drop a review, please drop a rating. And no matter whether you're listening on one of the podcasting apps or platforms or watching on YouTube, please subscribe to Disguised Coverage, please. And thank you. Tell all your family and friends and loved ones about Disguised Coverage and how awesome it is. Or if you hate this show, tell your enemies to watch the show and try and ruin their day. So thank you, everybody, for joining us live. If you're watching later, listening later, whatever have you, thank you so much for every single ounce of support. We greatly appreciate it. And also a huge thank you to Mr. Kendall Mirsky, who joined me, on tonight's episode and helped me put this episode together. I had a great time. You were awesome as always. And I'm excited to have you back for the next week, maybe even the next 2, as we started to form another idea here in terms of ranking these position groups. But you're awesome as always. Tell the good people where they can find you and all that stuff.
Well, first off, thanks for having me back, man. It's nice to be back on Disguised Coverage. It feels like home. But you can find me on Twitter at Mirsky Kendall. That is literally just my name, but last name, first name on Twitter. Not a lot of stuff on Twitter lately. I've been tiptoeing the ideas of jumping into next year's draft prospects early because I just don't know what to do with my
Russ is already doing it. Russ is sending me film.
Of course, Russ is already doing it.
Yeah.
He wouldn't be Russ if he wasn't already doing it. But yeah, that's kind of the only thing I've really been toying with posting on Twitter, other than just random Bills thoughts. But I can't stand talking about the Bills this time of year on Twitter because it's just an echo chamber of nonsense.
That's why I'm just showing film and breaking down plays on all 22 and
exactly. And that's kind of why I'm maybe I should just get a head start so I can understand some guys going into draft season, not be so behind the 8 ball like I was this past year. So yeah, you may see some of that if you follow me on Twitter. Obviously, that's the source of most of my stuff on Twitter. But Should have a Madden cast maybe this weekend. Still on the fence about that. I got a buddy coming to visit me this week here out in Utah, so may not have the time for it, but I would like to do it because it's the best team I've had to play so far. They're like an 83 overall, so that could actually be a good competitive game, hopefully. But yeah, that's where you can find me on Madden Cast over the weekends, obviously here on the Cover One YouTube channel, and then of course on Twitter at Mirsky Kendall. But yeah, thanks for everyone that joined. This was probably the best live chat I've been a part of post draft. This was a really good live chat today.
Everybody's fantastic. I think that's a conclusion for. I'm falling over myself here. I'm so tired. I wanted to pull up this comment one more time from Ralph Wilson Sr., who says, "I give you guys a 4.5638 in honor of our scores and how specific they were." That's
I'll
very
take
funny.
that. I will take that. That's a good grade.
Appreciate all you guys and girls. Thank you so much for joining us. And again, watching later, listening later, whatever have you, please rate and review and subscribe. Drop a like. We appreciate you guys so much. For Mr. Kendall Mirsky, I am Anthony Prohaska. This has been another episode of Disguised Coverage. I hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well, staying safe, taking care of one another. Be kind to one another. We will see you next week. And I say we because Kendall will be back next week to do the same thing for the defense. So we will see you next week. And as always, go Bills.